The Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and with me today, a good friend of mine, Johnny Exotic, Captain Johnny Stabile, down in South Florida fishing charters. Dude, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me today. This
Oh,
is exciting.
absolutely. Yeah, dude, absolutely. Well, we're here on the Outdoor Radio Network, and this is the first time I've had a guest on who focuses on exotic species. Now, I know you do more than just the exotics, but the few times we have gone fishing, and we need to fix that in this year. We need to go fishing a little bit more. You need to travel up here to Central Florida. We need to go fishing together up here. But the few times we have fished together, it has been focused on exotics. So tell me, let's start with who you are, where you live, where you guide, what you're chasing, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper throughout the show on all the tactics on how to chase these exotics and how we've done it on the episodes that we have filmed together. So where are you at, man? Let's start there.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm a Florida native, born and raised in just outside of Fort Lauderdale, right next to the big airport. And I've been fishing for exotics almost my whole life. Peacock bass is definitely one of the main attractions of South Florida. And then it just kind of opens the door to all the other ones. We have all kinds of cichlids, clown
Mm.
knifefish, snakeheads, which you and I just got to do. And and there's quite a bit more to it than just those, but those are kind of the main species too. To keep it simplified, those are the main species. And I mean, I was in the Everglades today. I still got my shirt on from fishing today. Of We fished out there from basically sun up to sundown, and I love it. I can't get enough of it. So that's what I do, and I love it. Like I said.
Awesome, awesome. Were you down on the Alligator Alley side of the Everglades, or were you further south?
Just a little bit south, right off of Highway 27. And
Cool.
the water level kind of dictates that whole area. So
Hmm.
it was really good today. We probably caught 200 fish today. It was
Whoa,
incredible.
that's awesome, dude. Heck yeah. It's blowing up here in Central Florida. I had a charter this morning, and we've got a bunch of bass in the boat, but it was breezy. When I was in
Right.
the bay boat today too, because I needed to be because there was. I mean, it was so windy. It was white capping on the lake, so I needed to be in the bigger
Wow.
boat.
Oh my
I had
gosh.
a bigger group. So, are you fishing out of a skiff mainly? Do you have a bigger boat for options for families? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've got a skiff, and that's my main ride. You know, that I can fish up to three people, and then if I have more, I have the option to use my dad's bay boat, which we also have insured for charters. So, if I get a 4 or 5 person trip, I could take the 22-foot bay boat. If not, I take them in the skiff, and the
Cool.
skiff is it's a little more personal, I mean, you fish on a skiff every day, so you know what it's like. And today it was great. I had one guy, we fished all day long. I mean, and we could get into places that the big boats can't really get into. So it's nice to
Heck
kind of
yeah.
get out, onto some of those other areas and really get on some good fish. A lot of largemouth today,
Hmm.
few peacocks. But yeah, fishing that skiff is my favorite.
Heck yeah, heck yeah. And are you doing fly and spin? Do you do one or the other? Live bait, artificial? What do you like to throw?
So in the Everglades, it's mostly artificial and fly. A lot of fly anglers come down, and I the other day actually I was throwing a 3 weight for some Oscars, and
Cool,
it's a
cool.
blast. And it's
Yeah.
fun even when you get a big peacock that comes up on the 3 weight. You're like, whoa, what do I do? But it's
That's awesome.
it just kind of keeps the day exciting, and that's what I love to do. I fish a lot on Lake Ida as well, which you've been on with me, and
Yep.
that's more of a live bait scene. A little bit of fly fishing there, but definitely a live bait fishery for sure. Which I got to catch bait in the morning. It's not my favorite thing to do, I'll say, but it does make the days easier when you're fishing with live natural forage.
Absolutely. Oh, I love it, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I spend most of my trips doing artificial, throwing DOA plastics or throwing some hard plastic baits. But today, my clients wanted to do that, but they also wanted to have some live shiners for the bass. So we did a little bit of both. And my preference is to throw artificial. I like hunting fish. I like stalking fish. I like chasing after fish. I don't like the bait and weight deal, but man, some people,
Right,
that's all they do. That's what they know.
right.
And that's just another style of fishing. Not my
Sure.
favorite, but definitely a style of fishing. And in this latest episode, we got to do a little bit of both. On our first episode, we did both. So I just,
Yeah.
having the ability to fish in different with different techniques and different tactics, man. That's something that people, if you want to get better at fishing, these are things that you need to work on. You need to say, hey, what do I struggle with? I mean, I really struggle with throwing a cast net. So today I'm only going to fish with bait that I catch with a cast net. Or
Sure.
you could be, man, I really struggle with throwing a topwater plug. Walking the dog, man. This one I have beat to death. And I just keep putting new hooks on it because the fish just keep wearing it out. But if you
Right.
struggle with throwing that topwater plug and you see that, hey, it's going to be an overcast day, maybe that's the day that you go out there and you practice that skill. That is something as guides, we have to adapt to the conditions. We have to figure it out. Every day is different. You might be on a great pattern, and then you get on the water, and dang it, the
Yeah.
wind shifted or the fish moved or everybody and their brother figured out where you were fishing and now those fish are so pressured they're not eating and you have to make a move. So that is a huge thing, man. Figure out what you are good at, figure out what you stink at, and then work on that and practice, practice, practice. And you're going to become a much better angler. And the style of fishing that you're doing, Johnny, man, if you like inshore fishing, and it's rough. It's going to be blowing. Those Everglades, hiding those canals and getting out on the lake, those are great options, dude, to get and catch some fish and not worry about it.
Yeah, I actually work with a good deal of offshore charter boat fishermen, and when it's blowing, especially in the what I consider the off season or the slow season, I pick up a lot of trips just from guys that are like, "Hey, these people came down to fish. It's too rough. Take them out, show them a good time," and I love doing that. I
Heck yeah.
truly enjoy showing people a good time and watching them catch some nice fish.
Awesome. How long have you been guiding?
Since 2018.
Okay.
So
Okay.
6 years now.
Yeah, perfect. Love it, dude.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you're crushing it down there in South Florida. Absolutely love it. Okay, so let's transition to if I'm a new angler to the exotic scene. What kind of rods and reels? What kind of tackle? Let's break it down, starting with peacocks, and let's talk through what do I need to do that. We'll start with peacocks, then we'll move to cichlids.
Sure, sure. So peacocks are kind of specific, and most people start out not being able to throw a bait caster or not being able to throw fly. So I would suggest picking up a spinning rod. It's or an open face rod, what a lot of people around the country know it as. And I would suggest throwing a hard jerk bait and getting used to that really hard twitch pause motion. That is the name of the game when it comes to peacocks. And the peacocks are super aggressive. There you go, you got one right there. Exactly. Peacocks are super aggressive, and they can also kind of lay dormant. So fishing those jerk baits, especially a suspending jerk bait, would be my number one bait of all time. Something that is going to be able to basically come and dart and then stop and either slowly come up or slowly sink down. That is the key. If you let that bait sit the longer you let it sit sometimes, the more likely you are to get a bite.
Hmm.
I mean, I can recall several times where I was fishing on the back of the boat with a good client or a friend on the front of the boat. I'm a nice guy, I let people fish on the front. And I will watch them do something. My bait, after I twitched it a couple times really hard, is just sitting dormant for a long time. I'm looking up at them, and then all of a sudden, my line
Boom.
shoots out, and I got a
Yeah.
big fish. And I've caught actually some of my biggest fish ever doing that before.
Hmm.
So, the jerk bait is a pretty magical lure. Now, they do get pretty expensive depending on what brand you go with, but
Yeah.
you don't need the most expensive one out there, just something good, and then eventually work into a bait caster, and really dial in those techniques, because bait casters kind of open up the fishing ability just by being able to control your line better, and
Hmm.
you can do that with
Hmm.
a bait caster over a spinning
Is
rod.
there a
So
particular brand that you like for the jerk baits? This one and size, this and color. Let's do those three. And
sure.
I know you said, just pick one, get one, but is there a particular one in style and color and size? This is a
For
number
sure.
8 Rapala X Wrap in the black and silver, and it's my favorite when it comes to the hard baits.
Yeah, I love fishing. Now, these are an expensive jerkbait, and it's just because when I say that I love jerkbait fishing, I will fish a jerkbait all day long and not catch anything, then throw something else and catch something, because I'm just diehard about it. I like fishing mega bass, 110s and 110 juniors, all, the shallow ones, not the plus ones or the plus twos. And I see, if you're having a tough day, you can actually get a bite on a really subtle bait, like a matte shad color or like a shiner color. We just have like a little gold or a little bronze on the top and a mostly colorless body, and you can get a bite going on that. But you can have a phenomenal day on like a clown pattern where you got bright red, bright yellow, fire tiger. There's one megabass lure. It's called
Johnny,
vegetation.
let me
Yes.
interrupt you real quick. We're quickly coming up on a break, but we got more to talk about with Captain Johnny Stabile here on the Captain's Log Radio. We'll be right back.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. We got so interrupted there, these silly breaks, but we got Captain Johnny Stabile. Before the break, we were talking about jerk baits. Now, one of my favorite lures, I've probably caught 14 or 15 species of fish, freshwater, saltwater, from redfish, trout, snook, tarpon, black drum, Spanish max, ladyfish, jacks, mangrove snapper, largemouth bass, peacock bass, specks or crappie, depending on where you are, bluegill, chain pickerel, perch. I can just, if I smallmouth bass, all in this lure. In fact, I got interviewed one time, and the guy said, I gave you $100. I blindfolded you and I dropped you off at a Walmart. You have no idea where you are. What are you going to buy? And I said, I'm going to buy a pack of DOA swim baits and an owner twist lock hook and a couple of these Rapala jerk baits, X wraps, and a spinning rod combo. And I'm going to survive. With that setup right there, I'm going to eat. I'm going to catch some fish and I'm going to live, right? Johnny, you were saying, now here I like this black and silver color, but you're talking about using a fire tiger color, which is orange and greens and yellow. And that's, you think about match the hatch, those colors, they look like the exotics. These
For
exotics
sure.
they're eating other exotics. I have
Yeah.
caught small peacocks, right, on a jerkbait and had a bigger peacock come and eat the small one and get
Yeah.
stuck in its mouth and catch the
Yeah.
bigger one. So
Right.
let's continue that conversation about the jerk baits. and then we'll keep going from there.
Yeah, no. So just when you're choosing color preference, and again, I not to stress this, but you definitely want to choose something that is suspending in the water column. And I've had some of my best days ever on some really vibrant colors, but if it's a slow day, you may not catch them on that vibrant color. You may need to go
Hmm.
something more natural, more like ghosty, something that's not as vibrant and bright, and you'll catch them as long as you put your time in. One
Good
other,
stuff.
yeah, and we caught a bunch of peacocks today on soft plastics. A white 3 or 4 inch jerk bait, soft jerk bait. We smoked them on that today.
Hmm.
It was incredible how they were eating it. And you're catching a lot of other fish in the mix too when you're throwing that all white jerk bait. That's also another one of my
Are
absolute
you sight
favorite.
fishing these fish? Are you just blind casting? Are you power fishing?
A little bit of both. We could definitely see a lot of peacocks today. All up everywhere. They were in the rocks. They were in the lily pads. They were, by the reeds, and we could see quite a bit of them. Just looking in the water. But honestly, the majority of our fish came from just blind casting, and
Hmm.
and we, like I said, we probably caught close to 200 fish today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, rod and reel. Typical bass or inshore stuff like a medium rod,
Sure.
7.6 medium, 3,000 reel,
Yep.
15-pound braid, 20-pound leader.
Yeah. So my day-to-day charter setup is a 3,000 spinning rod, 8 to 10 pound braid, 15 pound fluorocarbon, and a little small number 2 octopus hook. And
Okay.
I actually snell that on there. That's for my live shad. If
Okay.
I'm gonna go do a like a fun day of fishing, I'm bringing 5 rods. Just for myself. And I can really narrow it down to 3 if I had to, but I'm gonna bring a jerkbait rod, and I'm actually gonna bring 2 jerkbait rods because I'm gonna bring one for a hard jerkbait and one for a soft jerkbait or a fluke. I always have those two rigged up, and I will switch them out constantly.
Hmm.
I will also have a BFS rod. Now, BFS is one thing that I have really taken a liking to. It is ultra light bait casting, and it allows me to go down to a really small presentation. Something that you guys may have never even heard of before. Which is what I use BFS for, is called hover strolling, and I take a little minnow, presentation, and I just kind of mid water column, just kind of stroll it through the water column or hover it through the water column, and that will get any fish to bite any day of the
Hmm.
week. Then I also usually have something like top water or something heavy, and I also like to throw chatterbait, so I'll usually have a chatterbait rigged up as well.
That is one lure. Number one, I never use. And number two,
Sure,
when I have used it, I have no confidence in a chatterbait.
right.
I've used it in the salt in Louisiana and
Mm,
didn't catch anything. Switched over to a DOA swim bait and I started catching fish. I was like, take that stupid thing off my rod. I'm gonna put on DOA. I
right,
filmed
right.
a commercial for a company one time, and we were doing a bass kind of deal, and the guy that was kind of guiding us for that event was like, Tyler Chatterbait. And I was like, ah, like I was rolling my eyes. And he's like, trust me. And I caught bass on it, but it's just not my number one pick. But I know a lot of
Sure,
people that crush them on chatterbaits. It's a great bait. It makes a ton of noise. It puts out a lot of vibration. It will get a fish's attention.
right.
So that's cool that you have one tied on. That's never really my first pick, but this is why you are the man in South Florida. So that's one to add to the list. Let's transition to the cichlids. There's a variety of cichlids. These cichlids have moved up here in Central Florida, man. I've been catching cichlids on fly
Wow.
in Merritt Island. I've caught them on DOA shrimp, the 2.75 shrimp.
Sure.
They are in salt water. They're in
Wow.
the freshwater canals around Merritt Island. They are snook
Huh.
candy. They are
Yep, they sure are.
they're beautiful fish with their just different colors. In fact, my kids, we were in Cocoa Beach. We were fishing. It was ripping. It wasn't a day for us to get on the boat with my little kids. So we were at a ramp, and there's a park there with a playground. It's right there in Cocoa Beach, and we were catching Mayan cichlids and sheepshead and pinfish and speckled sea trout all in the same spot right off the dock using cut shrimp. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't
Wow,
believe it, man.
that's
But
amazing.
I love catching those fish. One fish I have not caught, one exotic, and I'm not sure you can probably answer this. I'm not sure if it's part of the cichlid family. It probably is. But it's the Midas, the orange one.
Yeah,
I have never caught a Midas. But if you wanted to target these fish, I did it with Captain Josh Greer. We focused on them and we're using flies, catching them on schminnows on a 5 weight. You were talking about a 3 weight, and that'd be a great
yep,
setup because it's super light. These fish are
yep.
like panfish on steroids.
Yeah.
They're like a big crappie or speck. If you live here in Florida, we call them specks. What is your focus? How do you catch them? Are you using mono in this situation? Tell me rod, reel, line setup for this fish. And we've got 4 minutes on this segment, so we've got some time.
Okay, yeah. So I actually tie my own crappie jigs, and I use a lot of crappie jigs for catching Oscars and Mayan cichlids and all that. There's a couple of cichlids that live on the Ida chain that require using worms or grass shrimp, and a lot of times people don't realize this, but you show up to a lake and it's got all this short grass. It looks like a freshly mowed lawn, but underwater. You take a
Hmm.
little dip net and scoop that up, you will get little tiny grass shrimp in the net. And it's got to have small holes. You take that grass shrimp on like a number 8, like a long shank hook, put it under a little float, and you will catch a vieja cichlid. And they're pretty rare.
Oh, never
You
heard of
don't
that.
see, yeah, you don't see a lot of them. It's not really a big thing. A lot of guys that come to catch them use worms or, even like crappie minnows. Like the really small crappie minnows. But Oscars and Mayans are so aggressive. I use beetle spins.
Hmm.
I actually use this. It's a Japanese spinner bait. It's a micro spinner bait called the Tiemco Cure Pop spinner bait, and it's about this big, and it wrecks them. The
How's the
Midas
hook on
sick.
that? How's the hook
What's
on that?
that?
How's
Oh,
the
it's
hook on that bait?
stout hook.
Hmm.
That's why, because if you use a light wire hook, you're gonna. I mean, your hook will be
Straighten it out.
destroyed,
It's going to
and
become a spear.
literally. So we use a super stout hook to catch these guys. That way you don't have to keep retying. Same thing on my crappie jigs. I'm using a really heavy wire hook for these. Now, if you get hung up, you may not get it back because the hook's not going to bend out like a cheap one. But on the flip side, you're going to be able to catch more fish than you can imagine on one crappie jig without having to retie every 10,
Love it.
15 fish.
Yeah.
um those Midas cichlids are very, very weather temperamental. I learned, and may he rest in peace, Hai Trong
Mm,
was the Midas cichlid master. He was a very good friend of mine, and
yeah.
he had the scientific edge on those fish. Now, they're very temperamental. Sunny days, not rain in the past, a couple days if you're going to fish for them. Not super windy either, no change in pressure. Like, just really hot, consistent, sunny weather is what you need for those guys. Bread balls is what we're doing. And it's not just like put a bread ball on a hook and send it down. It's like live chum with bread balls. And then when you put your bread ball on your hook, you have to cast it out and match the sink rate because they'll notice the difference in sink rates. Like,
Mm,
oh, this one's going this slow and this one's going a lot faster. So you have to kind of get that dialed in. And and I've caught it only a handful of times. I've only gone down. It's one or two. There's a few systems down in Miami that have them, but they're really difficult to catch. But the cichlid game in Florida can be make or break. You can go out to the Everglades and catch 300 in a day, or the water can be really high and it can be really cold and nasty, and you may only catch 10. Or, same thing with the Midas, you can only go down there and catch a few, or you catch none at all. So it's kind of all or nothing with the cichlids, and they eat a big variety of baits. Such as the Oscars and the Mayans and the Everglades. Not to jump around too much, but I've caught them on jerk baits. I've caught them on worms. The Oscars will just almost about eat anything.
Well, hey, Johnny, great information. When we get back, more with Captain Johnny Stabile here at Captain's Log Radio.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and I'm fired up, guys. I got Captain Johnny Stabile with me today. We're talking exotics. This man has it dialed. We've been talking about peacocks. We've been talking about cichlids, and we're going to dive into snakeheads next, which, if you don't know, them things are ridiculously fun to catch. But before we do, you know the drill. I want to connect with you on social media at the Captain's Log Radio. No, look at me, not the radio. At the Captain's Log TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Of course, you can listen to all of our radio shows on iHeart, Apple Podcasts, the Outdoor Radio Network, and of course on YouTube. But make sure you're searching for at the Captain's Log TV for all the socials. I want to see what you're catching. So make sure you're tagging us. Hashtag the Captain's Log TV so I can see what you're catching out on the water. Johnny, let's continue, buddy. We're talking about cichlids. We talked about the tactics and different ways to catch them and the crappie jigs. But let's talk about rod and reel and line, whether that be fly or spin. Let's do both of those for our listeners.
Sure, sure. I just discovered a three weight, and I bought it in hopes to go up to catch trout on it in the mountains. But I was like, you know what? I've got this thing. I may as well take it out to the Everglades. And I had a ball catching Oscars, and I caught a few peacocks the couple times I've taken it out as well. On a three weight. And I'll tell you what, when you're catching a bunch of Oscars, they fight so hard. It is a blast. And then when a peacock comes up in the mix, it's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So the three weight's fun. A lot of my clients, I bring a five or a six weight, especially if it's a windy day. I'll have them throw a six weight just so they can really sling the fly. Not like you have to send it really far or anything, but that way they're not worn out at the end of the day. Tackle other than fly, ultralight. I'm fishing 1,000 size reels, light, ultralight rods, BFS, like I was saying earlier, bait finesse system, ultralight bait casters. It is a blast. Whether I'm throwing little tiny jerk baits at them, the crappie jigs, beetle spins, soft plastics like I was today, all that stuff works. And I tend to fish lighter than I should. So I'm fishing 6 to 8 pound braid or even 5 pound braid, depending on what brand it is. And I'm doing a 10 to 15 pound fluorocarbon leader just so I don't have to retie so often. But that's the game. Ultralight fishing. These fish are they're bluegills and crappies on steroids. They are angry,
That's
angry
it.
panfish. So if you like to panfish and you want to catch 200 fish in a day, hit my line and we'll go fish the Everglades.
What about mono? Are you opposed to mono? Are you good with mono?
I don't really use it a whole lot. Most of the area that we're fishing is, around lily pads and around trees and all that. So I like the abrasion resistant. Well, not even the abrasion resistance of braid,
The
but
ability to cut through it and pull them out.
right. The braid will cut through a lot of the lily pads, but also just the ability to cast, a little bit more accurately with the braid over the mono. I feel like mono can kind of be it can be tough to cast a lot throughout the day. So the braid has been a real winner for me. And a lot of people bring their own stuff and they fish mono and they do fine with it. I'm not discounting it by any
Yeah,
means, but
yeah.
braid just works for me and for what I do.
Some of the best memories I have down there, the guys who taught me how to tie flies. I'm thinking of Scott Hennett and Brian over at Orlando Outfitters, Sammy, just good dudes who
Sure.
were like, you know what, let's go down the glades and we didn't have a boat. We just went on foot. We drove
Yeah.
down and we'd pull up our phones and we'd look at our Google Maps and we'd find areas and we'd park and we'd hike and we'd fish and we'd cast and we'd break off
Sure.
and we'd make fun of each other and we'd have, dude, it was so much fun. So
Yeah.
even if we don't have a boat, there's plenty of places down there you can go and just pick a spot and start fishing and find these exotics. We haven't mentioned jaguars, but there's jaguars down there.
Yeah.
That one took me a minute to catch on fly. It was like I couldn't get away from cichlids or peacocks. And then my buddies were catching jaguars. I was like, I just want to catch a jaguar. And then finally I caught a jaguar. I was like, so cool. Like what a cool, unique, beautiful, interesting fish. But getting down there with light tackle, whether it be fly or spin, chasing these exotics is a blast. And these cichlids they're gorgeous. All these fish are gorgeous. They're just
Yeah.
so unique. If you're so used to just catching bass or just hitting the flats for reds or trout, this is something within a couple hours drive you can do in a day. Like we're just
Yep.
down there filming for the snakeheads, and we're going to talk about the snakeheads next. We're just down there filming with snakeheads. I left my house at like 4 in the morning. We were on the water by like 8:30, and we took our time. I think it was 9 o'clock, but we took our time because we were waiting for that sun to get right and for the clouds to move in because we wanted some overcast. And then we crushed it. And then we drove home. And I slept in my bed that night. Yeah, that's a long
Yeah.
day, but there ain't nothing that a Celsius and a good sub from Wawa can't fix. Like that's totally doable to do in a day. But let's go snakeheads. Now, my snakehead fishing, and I don't know if I haven't seen it yet. Um, but I sent Jack. Jack is the main editor of the Captain's Log TV. He asked me for a picture. He's like, "Do you have a picture of you fishing for exotics from way back when, like when you first started?" And bro, I've sent him a bunch. I had long hair, I had a big bushy beard, like I looked crazy. Um, but I had one of this day where I caught a bunch of snakeheads on frogs. They were the cheap frogs from Walmart. They fill up with water. You gotta squeeze them all the time to keep the water out of them. But I was a poor college kid, so hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Fishing out of a kayak. And these guys were I remember the first one, like figuring out the pattern. I've never done this before. And I was just getting as tight and parallel to the shoreline that I could to be able to make a cast, slide that frog down the shoreline like inches. Because a lot of the canal systems, it's almost like they got a bulldozer and just and cut a square. Like it just drops off on the edges. And it's not a bulldozer because it's like limestone, it's rock, but it's a drop off. And if you could throw your frog down that line, like along the shoreline, like inches from the shoreline, and bring it down across the surface. Oh my goodness. You'd see them wake up behind it, boil after it, take off and smoke it. And if you like topwater fishing, it doesn't get much better than that. It's like a redfish boiling up behind a plug or a snook. It's It's like that big old snook behind me on the flats coming up and boiling up behind your plug. And you throw a topwater at a bass, and a lot of times they don't boil up behind it like this. They just explode on it. And that's awesome. But seeing that fish get behind that lure, oh my goodness. And Johnny, we experienced that the other day. Tell me, we got 3 minutes. Tell me about snakehead fishing. Because we did some stuff. I had to change some line out. And I wasn't expecting to.
Yeah, snakehead is not for the faint-hearted, and I told you that before you came down. It's a lot of casting. It's a lot of, just kind of plinking around trying to get them, and we're fishing super heavy stuff. Heavy rod, 50-pound braid, the Bangkok hooker twist knot, which I showed you guys it's a basically four line knot that basically 4x's the power of the braid so that it gives it a lot of abrasion resistance and strength. And we're casting at these fish that we can't really see that well, but we know they're there. And you gotta kind of not jump the gun when you get that bite, because you gotta wait for him to. He's gonna take a bite out of it, and you want it to go down just a little bit further in his mouth before you just hammer the hook set. And it was a bit of a learning curve. It was a bit of frustration, during the day too. It's not all rainbows and sunshines with snakehead fishing, but at the end of the day, I mean, we caught what, 8 or 9 snakeheads,
Yeah.
and it was an absolute blast. Like, you know, it's you can some people like myself, I appreciate the grind, because at the end of the day, we had something really great to show for it. We caught a bunch of fish. It was a good day. My back was hurting at the end of the day, which is always a good sign of making a lot of casts.
Getting old,
And
brother. You're getting old.
no, I'm not that old, but when you're making, probably 500 casts in a day, far casts with a frog, we're using a frog. It's a half of an ounce, and it's a silicone snakehead frog. It's heavy, and you got to throw it, as far as you can every time. That's what snakehead fishing is. When you get one, it all becomes worth it, because
Hmm.
they blow up, huge explosion on top, and they fight really hard. I mean, in the video, I remember specifically the biggest one of the day I managed to catch, by the way. I literally was on my tippy toes, holding that rod up as high and hard
Yeah.
as I could,
Keep it
just to
from
make
going
sure
down the
the hooks
lilies.
didn't pull out of that.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. So that's what snakehead fishing is, and it's a blast, and it's a grind, and it's worth every second of work that goes into doing it.
Well, every cast, this is the thing about snakeheads. We're fishing lily pads and grass and structure, and every cast, you have to be paying attention. You have to
Yeah.
anticipate, and because there's the potential on every cast that you're going to get blown up. If you make the right presentation, there's the potential that a snake's going to come out of that grass or out from under those lily pads, and they're going to come up and crush your lure. Hey, I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. This is the Captain's Log Radio. I've got Captain Johnny Stabile from South Florida Fishing Charters. We're talking exotics. We're going to get more into it when we get right back here on the Captain's Log Radio.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and I got Captain Johnny Stabile with me, Mr. Johnny Exotic. He got that name from a good friend of ours, Captain Jay Withers from Guidelines, and it is stuck. And I'm stealing it, Jay. I'm stealing it. I said it on the episode with the two of us down there. He's Mr. Johnny Exotic. I absolutely love that. And you've got that for a reason because you're so dialed into these exotic species down there in South Florida. And our first episode that we did, I can't remember if it was season 2 or season 3, but it was a while ago, bro. So it was
It
so good to get
was.
back. Yeah, it was so good to get back with you for this season, for season 7 coming up. But our first episode, we fished Lake Ida. Now, this area is, you're fishing on a freshwater lake. You're surrounded with homes. You're in the middle of the city, and it was beautiful. It was a really nice lake with canals and docks. There's grass. There's bigger areas. There's narrow areas. There's a lot of bodies of water connected, and in this lake, you have potential to catch largemouth bass, hybrid bass, clown knifefish, peacock bass. What else is there to catch in there? I think those are the four that we
Yeah.
focused on. And those are some, I mean, that was my first time catching clown knifefish. That was my first time catching a hybrid. We have those up here in Central Florida. I've never caught one until I was down there fishing with you. Let's dive into that episode. We started the morning not far. We didn't make a long run, and we were using the live baits. Tell me about that.
Yeah, fishing Lake Ida is it's diverse. You have the four main species like we spoke about, and thankfully we're able to catch all four and get you a Lake Ida slam.
Yep. Yeah.
But the it's funny. Some people when they come and book clown knife trips, and we literally go, you know, 2, 3, 400 yards from the boat ramp, they're like, "This is it," and I'm like, "Well." This is the best place to catch a clown knife. And it took us a little while to catch one, but we finally did. And we're fishing live bait, live threadfin shad on the bottom, a little split shot to keep it, kind of close to the bottom or on the bottom. And it's kind of a waiting game. I compare it to catfishing, where you're literally got lines out, soaking on, you're soaking baits on the bottom and you're just waiting for a bite. And that's exactly the name of the game. And still to this day, I've been fishing that lake for almost 15 years now, or actually closer to 20. And it's the same technique that it was, 15, 20 years ago.
You ever caught one on plastic?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, I have been dialing in more and more and more artificial bites on
Hmm.
them, and I mentioned that 5-inch fluke that I was using today in the Everglades. Well, that is one of the main things that I use, and I run it on it's a jig head called a Texas Eye, and it's got a lead head on the front, Texas hook, and you just drag it right along the bottom there. And it's just a 5-inch, soft plastic jerk bait. And we just drag it slow, give it a little pop every once in a while. And the thumps are intense.
Hmm.
It's like a snook thump, but maybe even a little bit more. The thumps
Hmm.
are intense, and they thump so hard they usually invert the soft plastic on the hook in a way that it is
Wow.
not natural. Not any
Huh.
other fish does this. And you got to set the hook like you are Bill Dance fishing his last, FLW tour. Like you got to cross their eyes when you set the hook.
Hmm.
And we've done it a bunch. I've caught them on some deep crankbaits too in some weird areas of the lake. But back to that episode, fishing the live bait is the best way to get those bites on the clown knife fish. And what's great about fishing the live bait is you get a lot of bycatch. You get the hybrids, which we call them sunshine bass. A lot of people in the rest of the country call them wipers or, hybrid bass. You get largemouth bass. And even during some parts of the winter, we actually get the majority of our peacocks down deep where we were clown knife fishing. So
Hmm.
I don't actually remember the time of the year that it was, but I don't think we got any
Right.
peacocks down deep.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think we got most of our peacocks up around the docks, and we sight fished
Right.
some, and we even had some baits die.
Yep.
Because after you cast it so many times, it's going to die. They don't last very long. And I looked at you and I said, you know what, man, that thing looks like a plastic. It looks like a white plastic bait. And I'm going to work this like a plastic bait. And gave some twitches, watch it shoot around, dart around, pause, tighten up, pop, 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 and watch the peacock come up from underneath this dock and smoke it. And we caught him that way. Are there any specks in that Lake Ida? I feel like they would eat some of those shad or at least come and hit some of those crappie jigs.
Yeah, there's a few. There's not really a lot. But on a cold day where the water temperature is cold after like
They
a big
bunch up.
front, you'll see them bunch up. I'll mark some on sonar, and they
Hmm.
sit on, in the center of the lake. We kind of fished around these big humps that come up in the middle of the lake. The average depth of Lake Ida is about 15 to 16 feet in the deeper areas, and
Hmm.
these humps will come up to about 8 feet in the center. And if you fish on those humps when it's really cold out, you will find some crappie or crappie or specks, whichever you want to call it. And we catch a lot of them on live shad. They're not necessarily the biggest shad in the wintertime. A lot of them just got done spawning throughout the winter and throughout the spring. But when you get those smaller baits and you're fishing them deep, lots of times you will often catch crappies just kind of schooled up right on those humps, and you catch all the fish you can catch in one spot.
Yeah, dude, those clown knife fish though. One thing unique about them, and honestly, I don't think I knew this until I called you to set up the episode to chase this slam. Was when you hook these fish, these clowns, and you get them close to the boat, they swim backwards. They do
Yeah,
this unique thing where they put it in reverse, baby, and they turn that tail, go backwards.
yeah,
It is the wildest thing to see. And I feel like when you got that Danko floating net and you went to stick it in there, he was like, nah, baby, I ain't going in that thing. And he's put it in
nope,
reverse.
he swims backwards.
Put it in reverse,
Yeah,
Terry. Put it in reverse. Like the guy was going in reverse full throttle, man. It was nuts to see.
yeah.
What is it about this fish that they do that? Is that a technique that they have figured out and try to get unhooked? What do you think that's about?
I think that when they're smaller, they have all those little false eyes, all the spots on their like lower tail fin there. I think that they just use that as a way to escape bigger prey. And when we catch them, I don't remember if it happened in our episode or not, but they jump just like tarpon do, and they jump pretty high out of the water for how small of a fish they are.
Hmm.
And between that and swimming backwards, it's a miracle that we get any to the boat, honestly, because
Yeah.
they are masterminds of shaking hooks off. And not only that, they have a really hard mouth. There's really no skin on the inside of their mouth. It's just
Hmm.
hard cartilage. So getting a hook set in that is just something in itself. But actually getting them in the net is a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So
Well, this
um,
latest episode we filmed, I'm not going to mention where we were, but we were down in South Florida chasing snakeheads. We started our day with some peacocks, and once the clouds rolled in, um, it was time. It was like a switch. It was time to move and chase and target and focus on these snakeheads, and I was excited about that. Some things that we had to do is we had to up our tackle. We're throwing 7.6 medium heavy rods, 4,000 reels. I had 50-pound braid on my reels, and 50-pound leader. Like we're using some heavy stuff because we're fishing around a lot of heavy structure. These frogs, it was American Snakehead is the brand, I think.
yeah, American Snakehead Custom is the brand, and
These
um,
frogs are intense. I mean,
they're
you could use them for bass. and anywhere
Absolutely.
in the country. And actually, the way they're built, man, they're like I said earlier, they're not that cheap Ozark Trail at Walmart for $1. Though those will
Right.
get it done. I've caught plenty of fish on those. These just held up. And if you think about how hard that fish is smoking that frog, you need a bait that's going to hold up. But that was a lot of fun. The DOA PT7, and honestly, we had several in the boat, but we never, I think we were just so focused on what we were doing, we didn't change our lures at all. But that's another good lure, especially if there's a lot of lilies, a lot of structure, because that has a single J hook that runs over the top of the lure, the plastic plug. PT is the PT7. Seven is I probably shouldn't talk about this, but 7 is the seventh version that they took to get to it. And then the PT stands for poop turd because it looks like a poop turd, is what Mark Nichols says over at DOA. But the hook goes into the top of the plug, the plastic, so that it can stay weedless. Johnny, listen, great info, great show. We've got a minute. Tell me if people, if anglers want to connect with you, where can they find you on social media? What's your website? What's your phone number? How do we go fishing with Captain Johnny Stabile?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with me is on Instagram at South Florida Fishing Charters, all spelled out. Or check out my website, sflfishingcharters.com. Or give me a call, 954-440-5200. And, we'll get you on the water and we'll get you some exotics because
Oh
I'm Johnny
man,
Exotic and that's what I do.
that's right. Hey, I have fished with you twice now. It's been nothing but a pleasure and a blast. You are a legend, dude. You're crushing it. Hey, I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. This is the Captain's Log Radio. We got Captain Johnny Stabile, Mr. Johnny Exotic this week. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you guys next time here on the Outdoor Radio Network.
Thanks for listening to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.